The room was full of people who decided careers, and not one of them took him seriously. A heavy wooden door shut with a soft, expensive thud, sealing the air inside. The conditioner pushed out a slow, tired breeze that smelled faintly of cigar smoke and burnt coffee, as if the building had learned to breathe through old habits. Thick carpet swallowed footsteps. Even the smallest shift of a chair sounded deliberate. Yellow lamplight pooled on polished table edges and turned every face a shade flatter, colder, as though warmth was something you had to earn in advance. Men in suits sat in a loose arc, not a circle, an arrangement that made a center without ever naming it. Leather folders, legal pads, wristwatches that caught the light when someone checked time too early. Pens tapped in quick, nervous rhythms, the way people drum when they want control but don't want to admit it. Bruce sat slightly off to the side, placed there by instinct more than instruction. Neat jacket, hair cleanly combed, hands relaxed, still. He listened longer than they expected him to, not because he was timid, but because he was studying the currents, who interrupted whom, who smiled only when someone higher up smiled, who avoided looking at the person doing the talking. When he finally spoke, it wasn't a pitch delivered like a salesman. It was measured, careful, an idea about a role, about a kind of hero the screen rarely allowed to exist without being turned into a joke. He didn't get through the first sentence. A producer across the table cut in, leaning back as if the chair were a throne. "So you're saying," he began, and then he twisted Bruce's words into a caricature, imitating his accent just enough to make it funny, not enough to be called cruel. He repeated one syllable wrong on purpose, dragged it out, then smiled like he'd offered a gift. A few men laughed, the thin, automatic kind, not because it was good, but because silence would have marked them as disloyal. Someone chuckled and then quickly looked down at his notepad, ashamed of his own sound. Another man's eyes flicked toward the door, as if he wished he could step out of his body for a moment. The producer who'd made the joke watched the room, pleased with his small victory. He let the laughter do the work, then settled deeper into his seat, confident that the moment had put Bruce back where he belonged. Bruce didn't react right away. He let the last forced chuckle fade. He looked, not at the producer first, but at the others, at who joined in, who hesitated, who swallowed discomfort. His face stayed calm, almost neutral, yet his attention sharpened like a blade slid from a sheath without a sound. Only then did he return his gaze to the producer, steady and unblinking. The joke had been framed as harmless, but it had landed on something older than the meeting: identity, dignity, the unspoken rule that some voices were allowed to carry authority and others were expected to entertain. The conditioner hummed on. Pens stopped tapping one by one, and in the artificial quiet of that carpeted room, it became clear that this was no longer about a script. It was about who was permitted to be understood. Bruce was there because the meeting wasn't supposed to be another audition for the exotic guy. It was a development session, concept, tone, character. They wanted a lead who could sell action overseas. He wanted a lead who could carry meaning at home. He'd come with more than a resume. He'd come with a structure, a hero who didn't posture, who moved like restraint was a form of strength, who could hold a scene without begging the room for permission. To Bruce, this wasn't vanity. Seen the wrong way, he would spend the rest of his career being used as flavor. Seen the right way, he could shift the frame for everyone who came after. He knew exactly how his accent sounded in that room. He'd sanded edges off his English for years. Late nights, tongue sore from repeating phrases, listening to recordings until he could hear every soft mistake. But he wasn't willing to erase himself to soothe strangers. And he remembered the pattern. Restaurants where waiters spoke louder instead of clearer. Casting offices where the smile came first and respect never arrived. The same moment in different clothes. The producer across from him tried it again, now dressed as help. "Maybe," he said slowly, as if addressing a child, "the audience will have trouble following you. We could simplify, make it easier." The word easier sat on the table like a paperweight. A couple of people shifted in their chairs, waiting for Bruce to either swallow it or snap. Somewhere near the end of the table, a senior exec watched without expression, fingertips resting together. Bruce didn't defend his accent. He didn't apologize for it. He repeated his last line, exactly the line that had been mocked, only this time he said it a fraction slower, sharper, eyes locked on the producers. Not louder, not theatrical, just clean. The room tightened. It wasn't the correction that unsettled them. It was the refusal to be managed. One of the men who'd laughed earlier stopped writing. His pen hovered, then lowered, as if he'd realized the notes were missing the point. Another executive, older, with a watch that looked like it had been handed down, leaned forward a few inches, the first movement of genuine interest since the door closed. The producer's smile thinned. He was losing the easy upper hand, and everyone could feel it, even if no one named it. Still, the producer pressed, aiming for reason instead of ridicule. People need to understand what you're saying. Bruce let a short pause open, just enough for the conditioner's hum to fill the space. Then he answered without heat. They understand emotion faster than words, he said. If the truth is there, they won't need me to sound like you. That landed differently, not as a clever line, but as a challenge to the room's assumptions. For a moment, the power dynamic wavered. The laughter from earlier felt distant, almost embarrassing. The first man who had laughed kept his mouth shut now. The exec with the inherited watch didn't look at the producer. He kept his eyes on Bruce, measuring. It still wasn't Bruce's room, but it was no longer a room that could dismiss him without consequence. The laughter didn't return. What filled the space instead was thinner, sharper. Paper shifted. The conditioner sighed. Someone cleared his throat and immediately regretted it. Bruce spoke again, and with each sentence the room recalibrated. Pens stopped moving. One by one, people leaned back, then forward, trying to decide where power was settling. The producer who'd mocked him crossed his legs, uncrossed them, checked his watch without reading it. His voice, when he jumped back in, came faster now, clipped at the edges. "That's all very thoughtful," he said, cutting Bruce off mid-thought. "But we're talking about a mainstream audience. We can't take risks they won't follow." Bruce didn't answer right away. He let the interruption sit there, unfinished, like a sentence with a missing verb. His eyes moved, not to the speaker, but around the table. He noted who avoided his gaze, who glanced sideways for cues, who had begun to look at him as a variable instead of a problem. He wasn't interested in winning an argument. He was adjusting the frame. Language to him was never the point. Intention was. Precision. The way a thought could land without force if it was aligned correctly. He leaned forward, not abruptly, not theatrically, just enough to close the distance by a few inches. The movement changed the geometry of the table. Suddenly, he wasn't off to the side anymore. He was present. "Let me show you something," he said. Not an explanation, an invitation. He described a scene, not with adjectives, but with action. A man entering a room. Silence. A decision made without dialogue. Bruce's hands moved as he spoke, not big gestures, just timing. Pauses where the body would stop, a turn of the shoulders. A look held a second longer than comfort allowed. The words became secondary. The rhythm carried meaning. One executive nodded without realizing he'd done it. Halfway through, the mocking producer tried to interrupt again and was stopped. "Let him finish," someone else said. Quietly, firmly. Bruce didn't acknowledge the rescue. He didn't speed up or soften. He completed the moment exactly as he'd planned, then let it end without a flourish. Silence followed. Not awkward this time, but focused. The producer exhaled through his nose, irritation flashing before he masked it. He leaned forward, trying to reclaim ground. "And if the audience still doesn't accept you," he said, "if they just don't buy it, like this?" The question wasn't about ratings. It was about permission. Bruce met his eyes at last. He didn't harden. He didn't retreat. The room waited. Someone glanced at the clock. The meeting was almost over. This was the moment where men usually conceded or exploded. Bruce did neither. He sat back, folded his hands, and let the weight of the question settle, not on himself, but on everyone listening. Whatever he said next wouldn't be a defense. It would be a line in the sand. The room held its breath. Even the conditioner seemed to slow, pushing out air as if it didn't want to interrupt. A man near the end of the table glanced at his watch, then stopped, caught by the silence he'd helped create. Papers lay untouched, coffee sat cooling, forgotten. This was the last minute of the meeting, the minute when people either moved on or moved something. Bruce didn't raise his voice. He lowered it. He spoke slower than everyone else, not to perform calm, but because speed would let them pretend they'd misunderstood him. He let a pause open before the first word, a clean, empty space that forced attention to concentrate. "I won't ask the audience to excuse how I sound," he said. No apology, no denial. He named the truth without giving it a wound to feed on. "My accent is not an obstacle," he continued, measured. "It's part of the life that built me. If that makes you uncomfortable, that discomfort is yours, not mine." A few shoulders shifted. Someone set a pen down, gently, as if a loud click would be disrespectful. Bruce kept his gaze steady, not locked on the producer, but on the room, the decision-makers, the quiet observers, the ones who laughed because it was safer than staying silent. "They won't accept me because I imitate a voice they already trust," he said. Another pause, brief and deliberate. "They'll accept me because what I do on screen is true." The producer opened his mouth, then closed it. A swallow moved in his throat. He had no quick joke that could survive this tone, no easy dismissal that wouldn't sound petty. Across the table, the older executive with the inherited watch straightened, palms flattening on the wood. For the first time, he looked directly at Bruce, not at the papers, not at the producer. The room changed posture in small ways, backs less slouched, eyes less evasive. A man who'd been silent all meeting lifted his chin, reassessing the shape of the conversation. The producer sat back, searching for footing, but the air had shifted under him. Then, the older executive spoke. Not warmly, not dramatically, just plainly, like a man deciding what mattered. "Okay," he said. "Tell it again, from the beginning." It wasn't approval. It was recognition. The first, Dr. Unlocked, not opened wide, but no longer barred. Bruce nodded once. He didn't smile. He didn't celebrate. He simply began again, with the same steady rhythm, as if this were always where the meeting was supposed to go. When the session finally ended, chairs scraped softly. The heavy door opened, letting hallway light spill in, brighter, harsher. The corridor smelled like fresh coffee and old ambition. As Bruce stepped out, two men lingered behind, waiting until the others walked away. One of them, someone who hadn't laughed, someone who'd watched, came closer and spoke low enough that the words belonged only to Bruce. "They're not ready," he said, "but they will be." The door shut again with that expensive, final sound. Bruce walked down the carpeted hallway without rushing. He could still feel the room's pressure on his skin, like heat after a close fire. He didn't mistake one round for victory. He understood exactly what it was. A first fight, one without throwing a punch.